Hey everyone, it's Carl, and I had a couple people ask me to talk more about skinning, theming Savage Worlds games based on this card deck, my cool cyberpunk card deck that I posted as a YouTube short. So let's talk a little bit about that. Adventure and intrigue, fighting monsters out of our league. We'll roll the dice and pray they're nice. A +2 and I might succeed. Everyone, Carl again with Tabletop Tango. I'd love it if you like or subscribe. Like and subscribe because it'd be cool to see the numbers go up, but we know we're not going to be famous. Also have a Twitter. Look at us go. Anyway, so let's talk about what skinning, theming is. Well, so what is theming and skinning? So that's the idea of, for the pieces of Savage Worlds rules, like Bennies, for example, I'll talk about that, getting something tailored or custom for your setting or your campaigns to really increase immersion of the players as they live within your world. I'm going to use an example called the Helix Nebula situation, which is one of my favorite campaign games or convention games that I run. It's available from Drive-Thru RPG if you want to play along at home or just look at it. I think it's one of my favorites. Anyway, so the first thing obviously is the character sheet. The Savage Worlds character sheet is really good. It's very functional, but it's kind of generic. So are the table tents that they provide. So perfectly usable. But if you're doing a different setting or a different feel to your game, you want something that the players can kind of latch onto. A lot of settings have their own character sheets that give you kind of a setting feel to them. But I like to think about, especially for my convention games, I like to think about really the feel of what I'm trying to get across from a campaign standpoint, from a game standpoint, not the setting standpoint. So in Helix Nebula situation, for example, the characters they play robots that have been awakened to find out what happened to all the humans on this ship. And that's what they're trying to do. So the character sheets represent that these are robots. It's got kind of a cool background. It's got the skills and everything put together with a font that sort of has that feeling. Obviously, that's for a one-shot, but it's still really cool if you can pull together something that adds to the flavor that your player characters, are going to put information into those sheets. Second thing, and probably the most obvious that a lot of GMMs play with, is the Bennies. That metacurrency, getting just the right Benny with the right feel versus, pennies or, something like that, really can add to the game and give that flavor. So you'll see a lot of people who play Deadlands, for example, they might use poker chips. They might use, I've even seen shell casings used. I have a zombie game, and I use little zombies that I pulled out of one of my board games, my zombie board games. I've heard so many things. People use little plastic soldiers, like the green plastic soldiers for a military style game. All sorts of things you can do. For the Helix Nebula situation, I use little spaceships. Little plastic spaceships. Now, what was cool is you don't have to necessarily pay for something custom, even though it has that feel. Sometimes you can find them, like the little green army men or my spaceships. They're basically toys that are relatively inexpensive, but really have that flavor. So again, Helix Nebula, little spaceships. I just searched on Amazon at the time, and I found a whole bag full of little plastic spaceships. Pretty cool. In addition to Bennies, there's also Conviction. And so I used a memory card in the Helix Nebula situation, a little SD card, an old one, and that represented Conviction. And when the players were throwing that out, it was kind of like, hey, I'm trying to use my extra memory in my robot to do something. So Conviction is cool. If you don't use that setting rules, I recommend you look at it. It's kind of neat. So one of the number one things you can do to kind of add immersion, because you're always throwing those out to players all the time. Second obvious one is the card deck. Having a card deck that has, an image on the back that's interesting, or, maybe the king, queen, their drawing is kind of cool, is really kind of fun. There's a lot of fantasy decks out there that might have dragons on them. If you're into Deadlands, things like the Deadlands box set came with cards that had that feel of the Old West poker deck sort of thing. For the Helix Nebula situation, that's a mouthful, I found a deck that, and this was just a search in Amazon again, looking for a deck with kind of a tailored look. I found a space deck, and this deck had nebulas and star clusters and all sorts of things like that, which really enhanced, as I'm dealing these cards out, kind of that feel that this is space, and the players are part of, they're out in the great beyond, and not we're not just plain ordinary cards. So that's pretty cool. Then the last thing, which is harder to do, is dice. Yeah, you can find dice that add to that theme. I've seen dice that have skulls embedded in them. So if you're doing a zombie or something like that, you can get a set of die. If you're doing cyberpunk, I've seen a lot of dice sets that are metal. They have sort of that industrial feel to them. I mean, I've even seen dice that look like circuit boards. I mean, there's a lot of stuff out there that you can search for. Some of them are expensive, some of them are not so much. For Helix Nebula, I had a harder time, getting exactly what I was looking for at the time. So I took advantage of dice that had this translucent, glowy feel to them, and that really kind of made it feel like that beyond the world sort of feel, and that was pretty cool. For a military game I had dice that actually were camouflage dice, and so that really enhanced. Everybody would see the camouflage dots come out and get rolled on a table, because I roll in the open, and I have a video that talks about why GM should do that anyway. So it was really kind of fun to have that specific thing that added to the flavor of the game. Now, if you're using a VTT, I'm talking about physical things. VTT, it's really easy to add these things. Like, for example, in Roll20, you can create your own Benny deck by just creating a deck, adding your Benny image to that deck, and then that's what you hand out. You can create custom decks in customize your deck in Roll20 as well, just by using the right back image, changing the image of the front. Now, obviously, it takes a lot of work to get all those images and import them and all that sort of thing. But once you get done, you've really captured what you're trying to do. For example, I had a cyberpunk game that took place in Chicago. And so my Benny was actually the image of the seal of Chicago, the city of Chicago seal. And then that was my Benny image that I put in there. And then I had skyscrapers from Chicago as the back of the cards that were on the screen all the time. So there's a lot of really interesting stuff you can do in VTTs to add that flavor that when you're not doing it live. Once again, Carl with Tabletop Tango. I would love it if you like or subscribe, and we'll talk to you later. Adventure and intrigue, fighting monsters out of our league. We'll roll the dice and pray that